The avoidant will never miss you the way secure attachment experiences, longing through acknowledged feelings of loss, through verbal expressions of wanting you back, through visible behaviors that demonstrate their life feels empty without your presence, waiting for the avoidant to show they miss you through traditional markers, reaching out consistently, expressing their feelings directly, demonstrating through clear action that your absence affects them, means waiting for expression that contradicts their entire defensive structure. The avoidance nervous system interprets missing someone as dangerous admission of need, as vulnerability that threatens their protected position, as evidence of dependence they have spent their life defending against acknowledging. Yet the avoidant does miss you, does experience your absence as meaningful loss, does carry awareness that something valuable has disappeared from their life, even as their defenses prevent them from approaching that awareness directly. The tragedy of avoidant longing lies in its invisibility, in its expression through channels so indirect and defended that the person being missed would never recognize these signs as evidence of being thought about or wanted. The avoidant misses you in moments they immediately dismiss, through impulses they instantly suppress, via comparisons they refuse to acknowledge, using emotional experience they cannot name, by observing from distance they will not bridge. This defended missing looks nothing like secure person's straightforward longing. It manifests as brief softening immediately followed by defensive hardening, as fleeting desire to connect instantly overridden by impulse to protect, as recognition of your value simultaneously accompanied by minimization of that recognition's significance. Understanding how avoidance misses requires recognizing that for someone whose entire psychological structure is organized around preventing vulnerable feelings from reaching conscious awareness, missing you becomes feeling they experience without quite experiencing, longing they carry without quite carrying, loss they acknowledge without quite acknowledging. The avoidance missing is real but operates so far beneath their defended surface that it appears as absence of missing to everyone, including sometimes the avoidant themselves. They miss you in the spaces between their defenses. The avoidance defensive structure operates continuously, maintaining protective walls that prevent vulnerable feelings from reaching full conscious awareness. This defense system functions automatically, requiring no conscious thought to activate, working perpetually to ensure the avoidant never feels the full weight of their need for connection, never experiences complete vulnerability of missing someone, never acknowledges the depth of attachment that would threaten their protected position. Yet defensive systems, no matter how well constructed, contain gaps. Brief moments occur when the defense is lower slightly, when exhaustion or circumstance or unexpected trigger creates temporary opening where feelings the avoidant usually suppresses reach partial awareness before the defensive structure reasserts control. The avoidant misses you specifically in these unguarded moments that arrive without warning or permission. They wake in the middle of the night and experience flash of wanting to tell you something before their defenses snap back into place and they redirect their thoughts elsewhere. They hear song you loved and feel brief ache of your absence before defensive minimization takes over, and they convince themselves the feeling means nothing. They encounter situation that would have been easier with your support and momentarily wish you were there before their self-sufficient defenses remind them they need no one. These moments last seconds rather than sustained periods, arriving as brief breaches in otherwise continuous defensive coverage. The avoidance missing in these spaces carries quality different from secure person's longing because it cannot be sustained or examined. Secure people can sit with missing someone, can explore the feeling, can allow themselves to fully experience the longing and even find meaning or bittersweet beauty in it. The avoidant cannot tolerate sustained experience of missing you because sustained feeling would threaten their defensive structure's integrity. The moment missing surfaces, defenses activate to suppress it. The avoidant might experience 3 seconds of genuine longing, followed immediately by defensive thoughts that dismiss the feeling's importance, minimize your significance, or redirect attention to anything other than the vulnerable recognition that they want you. These brief experiences of missing accumulate across time without the avoidant consciously tracking them. The avoidant does not maintain running count of how many times they think of you or experience flashes of wanting you present. Each moment of missing arrives, gets immediately suppressed, and disappears from conscious awareness as if it never occurred. Yet these moments leave traces in the avoidant's psychology, even when not consciously remembered. The accumulation of suppressed missing creates background sense of something absent, vague awareness that life contains less warmth or ease than it did. Undefined feeling that something is not quite right, that the avoidant cannot or will not connect to your specific absence. The avoidant also misses you during moments when their defense is lower due to their own vulnerability rather than due to thoughts of you specifically. When the avoidant faces difficulty, experiences stress, feels overwhelmed by life's challenges, their defensive structure must allocate resources to managing these immediate threats. This allocation sometimes creates gaps in the defenses that usually prevent thoughts of you. The avoidant might find themselves wishing you were there to help manage the difficulty, might briefly remember how your presence provided comfort or support, might experience a moment of recognizing that facing challenges alone is harder than facing them with someone who cares. These thoughts arrive during vulnerability and get immediately suppressed because the avoidant's defensive structure cannot tolerate both managing external difficulty and acknowledging internal needs simultaneously. The spaces between defenses where missing occurs also include moments when the avoidant observes others in healthy relationships and briefly recognizes what they lost. The avoidant watches couple demonstrating easy affection and experiences flash of remembering your warmth before defenses minimize the comparison. They observe friend receiving support from partner during difficulty and momentarily recall that you offered similar support they could not adequately receive or reciprocate before defensive rationalizations explain why they were right to maintain distance. These comparative moments create brief awareness that the avoidant sacrificed something valuable, but the awareness cannot be sustained because it threatens the defensive narrative that their patterns were justified and necessary. The avoidant experiences missing most acutely during transitions between defended activities, when their mind is briefly unoccupied and vulnerable feelings can surface before the next defense-maintaining activity begins. The moments between sleep and full waking, the space between ending one task and beginning another, the transition between locations or activities, all these gaps in defensive occupation create opportunities for thoughts of you to surface. The avoidant might think of you while driving between destinations, might remember you during the minutes before sleep, might experience your absence while moving between structured activities that usually keep their defenses occupied. These transition moments reveal that missing you exists constantly beneath the avoidant's defended surface, becoming briefly visible only when defensive activities pause. Understanding that the avoidant misses you in spaces between their defenses requires recognizing that this form of missing is real despite being suppressed, brief, and unacknowledged. The avoidant's defended psychology prevents them from sitting with longing, from acknowledging the depth of their feelings, from reaching out based on moments of missing you. Yet the missing exists, arriving in brief flashes that the avoidant immediately suppresses but cannot completely prevent. The question becomes whether missing that manifests as suppressed moments rather than a sustained longing, or reaching out provides any meaningful comfort to the person being missed, or any foundation for potential reconnection. The avoidance missing is genuine, but operates within such defended constraints that it rarely translates into action or acknowledgement that would matter to the person they miss. They miss you through sudden impulses they immediately suppress. The avoidant experiences missing you through unexpected impulses to reach out, to share something with you, to reestablish contact that surfaces suddenly and gets immediately overridden by their defensive structure. The avoidant encounters something you would appreciate, article about topic you cared about, place you mentioned wanting to visit, experience that would make you laugh, and experiences immediate impulse to contact you about it. This impulse arrives automatically, reflecting habit developed during the relationship, when sharing with you was a natural part of their routine. The impulse carries no conscious thought or decision. It simply emerges as instinctive desire to include you in their experience. Yet, the moment the impulse surfaces, the avoidant's defensive structure activates to suppress it. The avoidant recognizes the impulse to reach out and immediately generates reasons why acting on it would be inappropriate, unwise, or unnecessary. They remind themselves that the relationship ended, that contacting you would create complications, that reaching out might give you false hope or reopen connection they chose to close. They convince themselves that the impulse means nothing significant, that it is merely habit rather than genuine missing, that they are better off suppressing the desire to contact you. This entire process, impulse followed by suppression, occurs within seconds, so quickly that the avoidant may barely register it happened. These suppressed impulses occur with greater frequency than the avoidant would ever acknowledge, multiple times per day in the period immediately following the relationship's end, gradually decreasing to weekly or occasional occurrences as time passes. The avoidant experiences moments where instinct says to share something with you before conscious defense reminds them that sharing is no longer appropriate. Each suppressed impulse represents a moment of missing you that the avoidant does not honor, does not acknowledge, does not allow to influence their behavior. The accumulation of these suppressed moments creates internal experience of frequently thinking about you that contradicts the avoidant's defended claim that they have moved on or that you do not occupy significant space in their thoughts. The avoidant also experiences impulses to check on you, to see how you are doing, to verify that you are managing adequately without them. These impulses stem from genuine caring that the avoidant's defensive structure prevents them from expressing directly. The avoidant wonders whether you are okay, whether you have recovered from the relationship's end, whether you think about them. Yet acting on these impulses feels too vulnerable, too revealing of continued attachment. The avoidant cannot acknowledge. The avoidance suppresses the impulse to reach out and check on you, sometimes redirecting that impulse into indirect monitoring through observing your activities when possible without direct contact. These checking impulses reveal that the avoidance missing includes concern about your well-being, despite their defended presentation of indifference. The avoidant is not as detached as they appear. They carry awareness of you, curiosity about how you are managing, investment in your well-being, that their defensive structure prevents them from expressing. Yet the impulse to check on you gets immediately suppressed because acting on it would require admitting they care enough to wonder about you, would create opening for conversation that might reveal their continued attachment, would threaten the defended distance they have worked to maintain. The avoidant experiences strongest impulses to reach out during their own moments of difficulty or vulnerability. When the avoidant faces challenge, experiences setback, feels overwhelmed by circumstance, they experience impulse to contact you for support before their defensive self-sufficiency immediately rejects that impulse. The avoidant remembers that you provided comfort or help during previous difficulties and automatically thinks of reaching out before their defenses remind them that needing support represents unacceptable vulnerability. These impulses during the avoidant's own need reveal that they recognize you as person who could help them, who would likely offer support if asked. Yet they cannot allow themselves to act on that recognition because doing so would contradict their defended independence. The suppression of impulses to reach out during the avoidance vulnerability also reflects their protective instinct toward you. The avoidant recognizes at some level that reaching out only when they need something would be unfair to you, that contacting you during their difficulty while offering nothing during your difficulty or during periods when you might want contact would demonstrate precisely the self-centered patterns that damage the relationship. This awareness prevents the avoidant from acting on impulses that emerge from their need, protecting you from being used as occasional support system for someone who cannot reciprocate adequately. Yet this protective suppression means the avoidant never reaches out, never acts on any impulse to contact you, whether selfish or generous, maintaining complete silence that appears as absence of missing rather than as defended experience of constant suppressed impulses. The avoidance pattern of suppressing impulses creates internal experience of perpetual self-management that they do not recognize as evidence of missing you. The avoidant does not count the number of times they stop themselves from reaching out, does not track how frequently they must override impulse to contact you, does not acknowledge that constant need to suppress impulses indicates ongoing attachment rather than successful moving on. The avoidant interprets their suppression as strength, as appropriate boundary maintenance, as evidence they are handling the separation well. They fail to recognize that needing to constantly suppress impulses to contact you reveals that those impulses exist with significant frequency and force, that genuine indifference would not require such persistent defensive management. Understanding that the avoidant misses you through suppressed impulses requires recognizing that impulses they never act on remain invisible to you while being quite present in their internal experience. The avoidant thinks of reaching out far more often than they ever actually reach out. They experience frequent moments of wanting connection that their defenses immediately override. Yet from your perspective, you see only silence, only absence of contact, only apparent indifference. The gap between the avoidant's internal experience of suppressed impulses and your external experience of their complete silence creates disconnect where genuine missing exists, but remains completely invisible and therefore meaningless to the person being missed. They miss you by comparing everyone else to what you offered. The avoidant moves forward into new connections carrying unconscious template of what you provided, measuring every new person against standards you established through your patience, understanding, and care. The avoidant does not consciously acknowledge this comparison process, would likely deny that they are measuring others against you. Yet the comparison operates automatically beneath their defended awareness. Each new person the avoidant encounters gets evaluated through lens shaped by their experience with you. And most people fall short of the standard you set through qualities the avoidant barely appreciated while you were present, but now cannot help but notice in their absence. The avoidant discovers that new people lack your particular way of understanding their defensive patterns. You developed sophisticated capacity to recognize when the avoidant was withdrawing, to give space without taking the withdrawal personally, to remain steady despite their inconsistency. New people respond to the avoidance withdrawal with anxiety, with demands for explanation, with hurt that requires management. The avoidant finds themselves missing your unusual ability to tolerate their patterns without becoming destabilized, your capacity to maintain your center while they fluctuated between presence and distance. Yet the avoidant does not consciously acknowledge this missing. They simply feel vaguely dissatisfied with new people's responses to their patterns, unconsciously recognizing that no one handles them the way you did. The comparison extends to how new people demonstrate care. The avoidant notices that new partners show affection differently than you did, offer support in ways that feel less natural or comfortable, express interest that somehow feels less genuine than yours was. The avoidant cannot articulate what is different, cannot explain why new people's care feels insufficient compared to what you offered, yet they experience persistent sense that something is missing. This vague dissatisfaction represents the avoidant unconsciously recognizing that you provided specific quality of care they took for granted during the relationship, but now cannot find replicated elsewhere. The avoidant particularly compares new people's patience to yours. You tolerated the avoidant's withdrawal patterns for extended period, gave them space without pressuring them to explain or change, maintained hope and investment despite their consistent emotional unavailability. New people lack this extraordinary patience. They express frustration more quickly, establish boundaries sooner, refuse to tolerate the avoidance patterns for as long as you did. The avoidant experiences this reduced tolerance as the new person being demanding or inflexible, failing to recognize that your patience was unusual gift rather than baseline standard. The avoidant misses your patience without acknowledging it, simply feeling that new people want too much too soon compared to your accommodation of their defended limitations. The comparison also operates in reverse, with the avoidant recognizing qualities new people possess that you lacked, and finding these qualities less appealing than expected. The avoidant might encounter someone more emotionally defended than you were, someone who requires less emotional availability than you requested, someone whose needs feel more manageable than yours. Yet instead of experiencing relief at finding someone more compatible with their defended position, the avoidant discovers that this person feels less engaging than you did. That interaction with someone equally defended creates emptiness rather than comfort. The avoidant misses the depth and warmth you brought, despite that depth and warmth triggering their defensive withdrawal, recognizing too late that what felt like pressure was actually richness they cannot find in connections with more defended people. These comparisons reveal that the avoidant is carrying you as internal reference point that shapes their experience of everyone new they encounter. You establish standard through your specific qualities, through a particular way you related to them, through unique combination of patience and strength that the avoidant now unconsciously uses to evaluate all other connections. The avoidant does not consciously think this person is not as understanding as my ex was, or this person's care does not feel as genuine as what my ex provided. The comparison operates beneath conscious awareness as vague sense of dissatisfaction, as feeling that something is not quite right, as recognition that new connections lack quality they cannot name but can sense is absent. The avoidance comparative process also prevents them from fully investing in new connections because no one measures up to what you offered. The avoidant enters new relationships with unconscious awareness that this person does not provide what you did, that they lack qualities you possessed, that connection with them will not replicate what connection with you offered. This comparison-based reservation prevents the avoidant from bringing full investment to new connections, creating self-fulfilling prophecy where new relationships fail partly because the avoidant withholds full engagement based on unconscious recognition that these people are not you. The avoidant misses you by being unable to genuinely invest elsewhere, by carrying you a standard that makes everyone else feel insufficient. The burning dimension of this comparative missing emerges when the avoidant recognizes that the qualities you possessed and they now miss are precisely the qualities their defensive patterns prevented them from adequately valuing during the relationship. The avoidant took your patience for granted while you offered it, minimized your understanding while you provided it, failed to adequately reciprocate your care while you gave it. Now that you are gone and they encounter people who lack these qualities, the avoidant recognizes what they lost. Yet this recognition arrives too late after they have destroyed the relationship through their patterns, after you have moved beyond them. The avoidant experiences missing through comparison that highlights what they failed to appreciate while they had access to it. Understanding that the avoidant misses you through comparison requires recognizing that this form of missing is unconscious, unacknowledged, and unlikely to motivate reaching out or attempting repair. The avoidant does not consciously think about you while comparing others to you. They simply experience vague dissatisfaction with new connections without connecting that dissatisfaction to your specific absence. The comparison operates as background sense that no one quite measures up without the avoidant identifying that you are the standard they are measuring against. This unconscious comparison represents genuine missing, yet remains so defended that it appears as generic dissatisfaction with others rather than a specific longing for you. They miss you without the emotional language to name it. The avoidant has spent their entire life suppressing emotional awareness, avoiding vulnerable feelings, and disconnecting from their internal emotional experience as defensive strategy against overwhelming affect. This chronic emotional suppression has prevented the avoidant from developing sophisticated emotional vocabulary, from learning to identify and name their feelings with precision, from understanding the nuances of their own internal states. The avoidant can recognize basic emotions when they become overwhelming, anger, frustration, perhaps surface-level happiness, but lacks capacity to identify or articulate complex emotional experiences like longing, regret, bittersweet missing, or tender nostalgia. The avoidant experiences these feelings at some level, but cannot name them, cannot bring them into full conscious awareness, cannot discuss them even with themselves. When the avoidant misses you, they experience this missing as vague discomfort rather than as named longing. The avoidant feels something is not right, senses something is absent, experiences undefined dissatisfaction with their current state, yet they cannot identify this feeling as missing you specifically. The avoidant might interpret the discomfort as boredom, as life being somewhat empty, as vague restlessness that has no clear source. They experience the emotional reality of your absence without possessing the emotional language to name that experience as missing, as wanting you present, as recognizing that their life feels less full without you in it. The feeling exists but remains unnamed, operating as background static rather than as clear signal the avoidant can consciously recognize and respond to. This inability to name the feeling as missing prevents the avoidant from acting on it in ways that named feelings might motivate. When secure people recognize they miss someone, that recognition can lead to reaching out, to expressing the feeling, to attempting to restore connection. The avoidant's unnamed missing cannot lead anywhere, because the avoidant does not consciously recognize what they are experiencing. They feel vague discomfort, but without identifying its source, cannot take action to address it. The avoidant might attempt to resolve the unnamed feeling through distraction, through new connections, through increased work or activity. Yet these attempts fail to address the actual issue because the avoidant does not recognize that the discomfort stems from your absence. The avoidant also experiences missing through physical sensations they cannot connect to emotional source. The avoidant might feel tightness in their chest, might experience difficulty sleeping, might notice subtle anxiety or restlessness without understanding these physical manifestations as their body's response to missing you. The avoidance disconnection between physical sensation and emotional awareness means they experience the somatic dimensions of longing without recognizing those bodily feelings as emotional communication. The avoidant treats these physical experiences as random discomfort requiring management through physical means, exercise, sleep adjustment, distraction, rather than as signals pointing toward emotional need for connection or resolution. The avoidant's lack of emotional language also prevents them from recognizing missing when it surfaces during specific triggers. The avoidant might feel sudden heaviness when passing place you went together, might experience wave of undefined emotion when encountering something associated with you, might feel inexplicable sadness during activities you shared. Yet without capacity to identify these responses as missing, as longing, as grief about your absence, the avoidant simply experiences momentary discomfort that passes without yielding insight. The avoidant might consciously think that was odd, or I wonder why I felt strange just then, without connecting the feeling to you, without recognizing that their emotional system is responding to your absence, even though their conscious mind cannot name that response. This unnamed missing creates particular frustration for the avoidant during moments when they almost reach recognition, but their defensive structure prevents full acknowledgement. The avoidant might think something feels off and briefly wonder if they miss you before their defenses immediately redirect attention elsewhere, convincing them the thought means nothing. The avoidant approaches conscious recognition of missing you, but cannot quite arrive there because arrival would require emotional vulnerability. Their defensive structure prevents. The feeling hovers at edge of awareness without ever fully entering conscious recognition where it could be named and potentially acted upon. The avoidant's inability to name missing also manifests in how they discuss you with others. When friends or new partners ask about previous relationships, the avoidant struggles to articulate what you meant to them or what the relationship represented. The avoidant might say vague things about it not working out or not being right without being able to express that they lost something valuable, that they miss specific things about you, that the relationship's end created absence. They continue to feel. The avoidant lacks language to communicate the emotional complexity of missing someone while simultaneously maintaining defended position that required ending the relationship. Others receive impression that you mattered little to the avoidant because the avoidant cannot articulate that you mattered profoundly despite their patterns preventing adequate demonstration of that mattering. Understanding that the avoidant misses you without emotional language to name it requires recognizing that unnamed feelings remain invisible, not just to others, but often to the avoidant themselves. The avoidant is not consciously choosing to hide that they miss you. They genuinely cannot identify or articulate the feeling because their defensive structure has prevented development of emotional vocabulary that would allow naming the experience.